Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show where the action is the juice and where we live our lives a quarter mile at a time. I'm your host, Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
And I'm your other host, Cisco from Misfit Minded. You can follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
Each week, we take the red pill and use our certain set of skills to break down the best action films of all time. Today, we are talking about the 1989 film Batman.
Batman. The critics call it spectacular, says Gannett Newspapers. Gene Shalit says Jack Nicholson is colossal. CBS TV says it's a terrific time at the movies. And Rolling Stone magazine declares it a triumph. You can't take your eyes off it. Who are you? I'm Batman. Critics rave Batman could be the movie of the decade. Rated PG-13. Now playing.
That's awesome. The movie of the decade out in
I
'89.
mean, can we talk about that just 1 second? Because
Please,
I
yeah.
love the Batman logo with the TM underneath it. I love that. Love the movie trailer guy voice. I miss that
So
guy.
good. Same.
And then all the quotes, just selling the shit out of this movie. Best movie of the decade. Wow, out of all the '80s.
I mean, it is going to go on to be, Warner Brothers' surprise hit and like number one movie for many, many years.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's about Batman stepping up to protect Gotham City and taking on his first major enemy, a clownishly homicidal criminal known as the Joker.
Okay.
To get this bullet train started, we'll take the listeners back to June 23rd, 1989. They made this movie for $35 million, which today would translate into a budget of about $88 million, and
Which is
grossed.
pretty low for a superhero movie. Like,
Yeah,
let's be real. They cost,
Exactly.
in context, hundreds of millions of dollars now.
Yeah, like the Avengers movies are like 300 plus million, right?
Yes.
400 or
Yeah.
something like that. So it is kind of shocking to know that prorated, it's still only at 88 million.
Yeah.
It grossed in its time 411 million, which makes it like making $1 billion today,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah. That number is
awesome.
pretty shocking, but this was again, we'll say it again, big titty hit.
This is a huge titty hit right here. And also, they're not wrong in terms of like being a hit of the decade. It is
Mhm.
Warner Brothers' highest grossing film until Twister surpasses it in '96. So almost a full 10 years, only
Which we'll be doing soon.
3 years short.
Stay tuned for that. Couple weeks.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, what a time for great movies and what a studio Warner Brothers was in its heyday. It opened against Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and smashed it at the box office, having a 40 million open to Honey's 14 million, which is still actually kind of surprising just because
Yeah.
I would have thought that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids would make a lot of money, but
Mhm.
it's competing with Batman directly because kids and
You
adults
can't
alike
beat
want
it.
to go
Yeah.
see.
I think
Exactly.
that's what made it such a big hit, right? Is like, you'd had like the Adam West Batman, so like the older generation would be like, "Oh, I know Batman." Like, and then that grew up with the comic books, like the older people, and then you had the
Yes.
young kids that just see like a guy in a costume and superhero stuff, and they marketed like the shit out of this. Like, I was trying to think of like, obviously Star Wars did this,
Right.
to like great effect. That's how George Lucas got his money. It wasn't the box office, it was the toys.
Yes.
It was all of the merchandise that they sold off of Star Wars that he made a deal with them that he would get profits off of that, which they'll never make again. They'll never
No, of
make
course
that
not.
mistake again. But Batman did the same exact thing. They made toys. It was everywhere. You could get
Yes.
any type of Batman thing. Like, I was thinking of like the Six Flags, by me has the Batman ride and the Superman ride.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna lie, Batman is like, it's not my favorite ride, but it's my second favorite ride to go on there. It's so fun.
It's pretty pimp.
Yeah.
It's a very cool, innovative feeling ride.
Mhm.
And it basically had, at the Six Flags where I was growing up, it had its whole own like wing, basically.
Yeah.
It was like a Gotham City
Batmobile.
wing.
Yep.
Yeah.
All that shit. It's
Yep.
it's
And
highly recommend.
superhero movies, they get to benefit from that generational marketing of, like you said, like the people who remember the originals want to introduce it to younger generations, their grandkids or kids or cousins or whatever. It's like people want to pass on going to see this character in this movie, which you can't always get unless you have this kind of property.
Yeah. We should mention some of the other notables that weekend. We have number 3, Ghostbusters 2 going strong, still in its second week.
That's right.
Number 4, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and number 5, Dead Poets Society. So again, we talk about this like when there's so many different options for you to go see at the theater. You know what I mean? You could have a drama like Dead Poets Society and some of these sci-fi, more actiony hero stuff, like Ghostbusters 2 and Indiana Jones.
Yep.
And then just the final like other notables I put for this top 10. Star Trek 5, The Final Frontier is at
Let's
number
go.
6. Field of Dreams at number 7. We're kind of seeing a comeback here for our guy.
Yep.
Costner it has a new movie out, so excited for him. And then Roadhouse, the original, which we've covered on the show, at number 9. So all of these releases, aside from Honey I Shrunk the Kids and obviously Batman, had been out for like 2 or more weeks. So this is just residual people. Again, we were talking about this before we started recording, but like word of mouth,
Mm.
people going to the theater to see it. But I think just looking at this list, I think, we could talk about some of the interesting things here. I think one thing to note is the amount of sequels. Because
Yes.
a lot of people think, like, oh, that's the problem with Hollywood today. It's all sequels. Ghostbusters 2, Indiana Jones 3, Star Trek 5. These are, it was not a new phenomenon, is basically what I'm trying to say. Like, especially in
Yes.
the 80s, I would say it definitely like ramped up where we could see like, oh, let's we could stretch this out to more films and not just thinking of films as properties rather than just like
Yes.
single stories, one and dones. Yeah.
And also the variety, right? That like there used to be a Dead Poets and a Field of Dreams that came out alongside of these more like popular,
Yeah.
generalized pieces of media. And that like, shows that the audience was interested because these movies are still doing well at the box office.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm like just trying to think of like new releases lately. Like, I mean, I saw Maxine recently, and then like there's like Despicable Me 4, and like so there is still
Inside Out
like
2.
some variety, but you still see that like sequel thing happening a lot too, like now. But
It's true. I mean, my favorite is I like to go to a Sunday matinee and try to catch the elderly audience to see kind of like what they're seeing. And there's still movies being released for them. They're not bringing in huge numbers, of course, but the one I can think of is like a while ago. It was sort of like Letters on a Scandal or something. I think I'm conflating it with that Kate Blanchett movie from a while back. But
it
it was like
sounds somewhat familiar. Yeah.
it was a really interesting Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley movie
Okay.
about like this woman who was who was receiving these like really graphic letters that were like, saying like all kinds of like really inappropriate stuff to her in like olden times England,
Yeah.
and like the community in an uproar. And it was a packed house. Like I was just going to see it because I love Olivia Colman and Jessie
Of
Buckley, and I was like,
course.
I'm trying to support them when they
Yeah.
make these like more independent
Also
movies.
appeared in the newest season of The Bear again. She's killing it on The Bear,
Oh
Olivia
God,
Colman.
she's so anywhere she shows up, she is
She's
just
great.
God
Never
amazing.
bad. Never bad
But
performance.
like a huge audience showed up to see this movie with these women in it, and I was like, they are not marketing this, and it's a packed house. This is
Well,
ridiculous.
even like I thought Maxine, the box office stuff for this weekend is pretty interesting because it's made the most money already out of the first 2 movies,
Let's
which is
go.
like insane, that so again, Maxine is the third in this trilogy, so another sequel, but I think just the funniest part too, and we'll get into the movie after this, but just trying to explain the Maxine trilogy to my family on 4th of July, I felt I was going insane because
Same.
they were not understanding it. Like they were like, "So it's a prequel, right?" I'm like, "No, it's a sequel." And they were like, "Oh, but wasn't there one back in time?" I was like, "Yeah, that was Pearl. That was a prequel, but
Right.
now this is a sequel to X." But they were like, "But X was the first one," and I'm like, "Oh my fucking god."
Yeah.
And they were
I
like, and
mean,
Mia Goth, like they were like, and she's in all of them, right? I'm like, yes, she is, and she's playing different characters. Like, it is insane to like describe, but like I think that's part of the reason I think that trilogy is just like it's so different and so unique, and I love that, even though I love more of the movies and some of them than others, like just the fact that it is like so unique. We have this horror serial killer, and Mia Goth just killing it every single time. Like, I'm happy to see that doing well.
Yes, yes. I mean, it also represents that the difference in media between like when it's just a cash cow and you're just using a property to try to keep people coming, and when you're actually creating like a kind of a piece of culture. You know, like the way the Pearl and X and Maxine situation come together
Yeah.
is like, you know, the cultural phenomenon of like Halloween or Scream. It like means something. It has legs that are not just like, oh yeah, the shock value keeps people coming in, or the, you know, intellectual property that it's based on keeps people coming in. It's
Yeah, it
like,
wasn't
no,
supposed to
this is
be a
creative.
trilogy. Like, I think this I remember this Ty West telling the story of that, like, that they shot X and everything, and they were, like, in New Zealand or something, and this was during the pandemic, and then he was like,
Amazing.
you know, what if we did another story with this setting? Like, I could, you know, like, and just came up with Pearl, like, let's the backstory for this killer and where she came from. And I love Pearl. I think, you know, X and Pearl in particular are just so much fun. And yeah, go see
Yeah.
them if you haven't yet.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Regardless, there is something about what makes properties stay. And it's either like this film we're talking about, which is kind of like an intellectual, ongoing cultural piece, or people who are able to influence and create something new in the culture, like with, you know, Maxine and Pearl and X. So I'm excited to see it. I've got my tickets, but I haven't caught it yet. And so we'll definitely have to
Yeah,
talk more about
I
it
was
once I
like,
catch
I
it.
was like pussyfooting around talking about Maxine, so we'll save that convo for another day because I don't want to
For
influence
sure.
anybody. So, but you should
But
definitely
go out
see
and see
it.
it.
You should
Yes.
definitely go out and see it. So,
Yes.
um,
Exactly.
yeah, let's get to our first segment of the day called "Getting the Band Back
Yes.
Together."
I don't have friends. I got family.
In this segment, we take a slow motion look at the filmmaking choices that went into the film and all of the ass kickers responsible. Movie was written by Sam Hamm.
Let's go.
It rhymes. He also wrote this and Batman Returns. Warren Scarron also wrote it. Uncredited writer on Top Gun. Did the screenplay for Beetlejuice shortly before this movie came out. We'll talk about that piece.
Yep.
Beverly Hills Cop 2, and then unfortunately died young in 1990. Batman creator Bob Kane was hired as a consultant on this movie, and I think all of the sequels too, at least in the first like four.
Yeah, respect. A lot of
Um,
respect.
and then of course, you know, it was directed by Tim Burton. So yeah, speaking of filmmakers, what are some of the things that stood out to you on this movie?
Well, this is interesting because I got a pretty hot take. I'll be honest.
Ooh,
I'm
we're
not a
starting with Karate
huge
Kid. Let's go with the hot
we're
takes.
going
Yeah,
hot. We're
let's
coming in
go.
hot here. I'm not a huge Tim Burton fan. I'll say his
Okay.
aesthetic is not really up my alley.
Okay.
However, I have to admire some of his like, you know, amazing work and his unique vision. And I think like my favorite Tim Burton movies are the Batman ones because of course like I
Okay.
enjoy Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands like there's something in there and you know I rewatch them every once in a while but it's like his these first two Batmans I love to rewatch. They're just they look so good, they're shot so well, and they have his aesthetic, but they're so much more accessible, I think, than some of his more like very auteur stuff. Like Beetlejuice is really great, but I do think it like there are some kids that I can remember growing up with that were like, I'm afraid of that movie and I'm never watching it again.
Yeah, he definitely brings like I mean, I think I'm like with you in part, you know, I think there was a period, I don't know what happened to him during the 2010s where it just like
Yeah, he was
I
making the most random shit.
you know, like Willy Wonka remake and like, you know, all the shit that's like what like is he just like rich and just like, you know, bored? Like,
Bored?
you know,
Yeah.
like what's but there are some, you know, like you mentioned a lot, but I do like Big Fish a lot. You know, and Sweeney Todd. So like in the 2000s I thought he still had some juice, but it's just been recently. He did the Dumbo remake too, which I didn't see. Like a lot of these I haven't even seen just because like you know the reputations have just been like so horrible. I did see Dark Shadows. That was terrible. That was a
Right.
Johnny Depp
It's an
another
interesting,
remake kind of
yeah,
thing.
thing where like he tries to lend his aesthetic, but he's not allowed to bring his storytelling in the same way in some of those movies. And that's what I find to be interesting about his Batman
I think
movies.
that's my biggest problem with him. And I did come across an interview when I was looking at Bob Kane stuff where he was like he is so focused on the aesthetic that sometimes the story gets away with him, which I completely agree sometimes. Where like, you know, in the 80s and 90s, like Pee Wee Herman, we didn't mention either. Like, you know, some of these are just so goofy and like fun and but like that kind of loose storytelling works for that. But then
Mhm.
getting into some of these like very specific cultural things that you're trying to play on, you do need to play it a lot tighter, and he just doesn't.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things where like he's kind of like an auteur in the sense of like how, people can try to copy Wes Anderson, but you don't see Wes Anderson not tell his own stories with
did you
his
see what he
aesthetic.
just said recently too on this
I
topic?
did. I did.
I don't
And
have
I
an
was like,
aesthetic.
bro, come on. But that I feel like that's like what happens to directors as they go on, is that like they don't want to be boxed in. And I do feel like that's sort of that's what I was picking up from Tim Burton in those like later 2010s, is that like he was trying not to just be defined by the aesthetic, but it's like I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well,
I
we were having
wish
this
that
convo kind of before we started recording too, and I think it's part of a Hollywood problem too, which I'm not just going to put all the blame on Tim Burton, where it's just like,
that's right.
let's give, this movie that should not cost this much, let's make it for $100+ million, and it looks digital and horrible. Like Burton in the CGI age, it just does not translate well, and so
No.
I'm nervous for Beetlejuice 2. We'll see what happens with that, but I did like in the trailer I did like they were doing the stop motion like worm stuff still, and I was like,
Yes.
okay, yes, this is what you need to
That's
start getting back to.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, that's exactly what stands out to me about the filmmaking in this movie is the production design is unreal, the costumes and
absolutely.
makeup, they have that like Burton-esque kind of texture that like feels real, like it's coming off the screen. I love all the steam and smoke and the fucking miniatures. They are pristine. Like he gets amazing establishing
Yeah.
shots that feel like a comic book that's truly coming to life. And I do think that's a weird thing when CG comes around and they try to do too much or something. Also, I don't love shadows usually, but I feel like you can see the deliberateness in it, and I really dig the way he, highlights eye color and pops color out of shadow in this. I really feel like this is his most accessible to me in a way where I'm like, man, I love this guy.
Hmm.
Even though if I had to watch other movies, I would find there would be things that would put me off because sometimes the aesthetic is too intense, but it's just perfect here.
Yeah.
And one funny thing that made me laugh was in the credits realizing that Prince created all the original songs
I'm
for the
I'm
film.
surprised you didn't know
That's,
that. I
I
feel
mean,
like that's
like,
such a big piece. That's another,
it made perfect sense when I saw it, but I was just like, oh my God, yes,
it's
yes.
another type of like franchising it, where it's like, let's get the most popular artist right now and he can do the whole soundtrack, and people will buy it just because it's either Prince or Batman, or they're fans of both.
That's true. I mean, either way, it
Yeah.
supports what we were talking about last time with Karate Kid 2 is like more original music for these movies,
And you
and
should, if you haven't, look up the Prince music video he did where he's like with the goons, just like messing stuff up. It's really great. I really,
I love that. That
I
cross promo is perfect.
yeah. I will. So we've been pretty negative so far. I'm not even mad at the hot take, honestly. I feel like that's a good one to
It's fair.
open that conversation with. The thing I love about a lot of Batman movies is like, there might not be my favorite, but they'll have like, they can add different elements and be like, this part is my favorite. So this movie does have a lot of my favorite things in it.
Mm,
Like you said, this is my favorite Gotham by far.
beautiful.
Like it feels like an actual city, like you said, all of the fog and smoke, and like the
The
criminals look like
grime.
they're on like some kind of drugs, like that's even beyond heroin. Like what is the drugs going around in Gotham? Like,
Seriously.
they look so zonked out. I would also put in there the Danny Elfman score is my favorite out of the Batman scores. I
I
mean,
do love their long-term collaborative relationship.
yeah.
They work together
So
so
good.
well.
And so it's like I like the Michael Giacchino score from the new one. I like the Hans Zimmer score, but to me, when I think of Batman, this is the score I think of.
Same.
Same thing with like the Superman score, the original Superman score. Like you just can't beat
Yes.
those ones. They hit it so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked a lot about a lot of things that same thing with the Batmobile. This is my favorite Batmobile.
Oh,
I think a lot of the things that they do in there is because it's so it fits this aesthetic, like you're saying. Like,
yes.
the thing about the Dark Knight, it's been ridiculed for it, but it's like it just looks like Chicago. Like where this doesn't feel like an actual city. And then the
Right.
same thing with the Batmobiles. I feel like lately it's this super hardcore like how real can we make this like in the real world? And it's, that works, for these new Batman movies, but it's also like, this is just a ridiculous concept. And so,
Yeah, it's a little bit much to ask of the audience, and this movie perfectly encapsulates like a mix of whimsy and darkness without getting too into the darkness realism like the modern ones do.
Yeah, I did forget how much like Batman Begins in particular is like influenced from this movie, or even like some of the Joker stuff. Like they definitely looked at this when they were making the new Dark Knight trilogy. I love the noir style. Like that to me was like the most comic book stuff, like where just all the goons are in trench coats and like, these striped suits and fedoras.
Yep.
Yeah, smoking cigars.
And like Keaton's way of brooding is much more noir-esque than, angry or vengeful, the way that maybe some of the later Batmans or the later actors play Batman.
Yeah, we'll get into that with like performers. I definitely want to get into that, but this is definitely a take on Bruce Wayne and, and Batman.
It is.
That I want to talk about. Yeah, I think the only other things, I love the sweeping shots like up the building, like you said, like using miniatures and stuff. They really give it like a big scale. And they double down on that with Batman Returns with the Christmas aesthetic, which I love. Batman Returns, the sequel to this.
Yep.
The Joker origin story, I think, is like, again, like they're adding iconography to like a story that's already happened. So you get the Bruce's parents being killed with the pearls, you get Joker falling into a vat, and all these things that it's just embedded into my brain.
To life. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the Gothic architecture, the gargoyles and all that. I love that, about this movie. And some of the shots of like the bat signal and Batman next to it in the shadows, like you mentioned, also great. That's to me, that's why I come back to this movie more than anything, is just that to live in this world, which just feels so different than any other superhero movie.
It's true. It's sort of like there is something about how these first renditions of them bringing these kinds of comic books to the screen, like, and I feel the same way about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies.
Yes.
Is that like they were bringing to life things we'd seen sketched or something before, and they really made it feel like it's like, I did want to see that actually happen. I saw it happen kind of in image form, and I wanted to see it for real and like feel it in real time. And I do feel like this movie both like gives you a little bit of wish fulfillment, but also expands upon kind of what that greater story was.
And this one had like the added challenge of making it darker. Like I think it hasn't aged super well in some respects to that, you know what I mean? But like at the time, I can imagine audiences being like, whoa, this is so much different than the Batman TV show like we grew up on. Like this is a much darker and brooding and grittier like world. Yeah. So I do give them props for that. For like, now it's just like that's what Batman's known for, but that definitely was not the case in 1989.
Yeah, they basically set that tone and were sort of like, hey, he really is the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
He's not this like goofy idiot the way that they made him be on TV, which was just such a funny
And then they kind of get back to that in like the Schumacher ones again in the 90s.
Yeah, they go a little too far on the whimsy side.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting about these first installations, is that like Tim Burton is pretty precise on making sure there is a direct balance in the mix. It's not one way or the other too much.
Yeah, and I mean, I was definitely thinking of like, comparisons, and I was thinking of like James Bond, I think came to mind a lot, where it's like this long running franchise. You can point to certain movies that have a more lighthearted and goofy tone, like especially like the 80s ones, I would say. And then you can go to like the Daniel Craig ones for like the hyper real, one. Like it's just a character that you can go all these different places with, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about some of these performances in this next segment called Choose Your Fighter.
Welcome to the party, pal!
In this segment, we will take a look at the bros and babes that flex their acting muscles for us, and sometimes the real muscles for us movie buffs. This film stars Billy D. Williams, Jack Palance, Kim Basinger, Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and Michael Keaton as Batman. Tell me your takes.
Yeah, I guess not too hot takes. I only really have 3 performances here, which are like the 3 main ones. So I think we should start with Keaton though. Everyone I talked to from that like grew up during this period talks about like how he wasn't taken seriously at all. like he was like Mr. Mom. He was like this comedy guy in the
It's
eight.
amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, we see this phenomenon still when like a superhero casting gets announced and they're like, that guy, blah, blah, blah. And it's like
Oh.
the nerds never learn their lesson to just shut up and just watch the movie. They just,
Well, trust that an actor is an
yeah,
actor, not
exactly.
only the parts they've played.
But I think he does a decent job. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite Batman or even Bruce Wayne. I think you can kind of feel him still like testing out like how big should I go, and like there are moments where he does go big, but for the most part, very subdued and quiet and brooding. Which that's the Batman take we see now. I think the biggest problem I have with it is just like the relationship aspect with him and Kim Basinger. Like
Yeah.
I just don't buy it. It just like, and this is a problem that
It
a
happens
lot of
pretty fast.
yeah, like a lot of Batman movies kind of fall into this trap. I feel like where it's just like, why is he in this like why is she? What is she getting out of this? Or like what is her attraction to this rich guy other than maybe he's rich? I don't understand.
Yeah, they only give us that like one moment where he doesn't try to use his name to woo her, and it's like that. I think they were like, that's enough. That's totally enough. But it's like I don't know. I still
I'm like,
need
that's still
more.
kind of weird. That's
Yeah.
still kind of a weird move to pull when you're
It
first
seems
meeting
like a
somebody.
trope now, but
Yeah.
maybe it was new. Like maybe in '89, that's something that like people hadn't seen or something. But it did feel a lot like a trope. Like, oh, he's not he's a not pretentious Bruce Wayne. He's not a famous womanizer Bruce Wayne yet.
Yeah.
And
so and then they kind of deal with like again the famous superhero trope of like, should I reveal my identity to her? But again, that a lot of that stuff moves so fast. You don't get like an emotional impact of that, or like
right.
Because Joker has to pop in and then we're back to this plot.
Yeah.
So so she's fine too. I think I just think like she doesn't make any really big impact for me. It's
She's just being Kim
there.
Basinger and almost
She's just there.
shattering into a million pieces at all times. Like that's her big strength, is that she can just react to almost anything, which I think is like, to your point, part of why it's like she makes it all be alive, but that doesn't necessarily make it feel like it was developed. She's like, I loved you and I'm hurt by these things, but I'm sort of like, I believe you are. I just am also like, how could you be that into him right away?
Well, it'd be like
how
one
is
thing.
that?
I think one thing to fix it. I guess this was part of my questions and plot holes part,
Okay.
but like, I think a lot of this could be fixed of just like she is obsessed with Batman, and she wants, and so like her during her research, she finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and so that's why she's kind of seducing him or something like that, and I think that would have been like a better route potentially.
Yeah.
And
It does
yeah.
It does feel like she's really manufacturing the chemistry as opposed to what feels like pretty undeniable chemistry between him and Michelle Pfeiffer. Like, it does feel kind of like,
or even like Nicole Kidman in Batman Forever, like where
yeah,
the
like
first movie where like actively someone wants to fuck Batman. I feel like,
but also like these men and women have better chemistry. Like I do feel like Keaton is
That's
an
what's
interesting
missing.
Batman
That's what's
here.
missing.
Yeah, where like I feel like I don't know how he's not completely enamored by Kim Basinger. She was like so hot in the 80s.
My god, yeah.
But there is something about how like he doesn't really seem to be that into her. Like that I think is the weirdest part to me too.
It's like he's just going along with it, and that's that's what I mean. Where it's like he's being maybe too subtle with this.
Yes, yeah, I think the performance is too subtle because like even that weird line where he's like, well, then why don't you marry her, Alfred? It sort of is he's basically saying like I don't even really like her that much, which is just so weird.
It is, and then the last one, obviously, Jack Nicholson Joker, which if we out of the three, this guy is the MVP. I think he just took that role, made it his own. Again, I could hear a little Cesar Romero, especially like in the laugh. The Joker that came before him and Adam West, but like he fits this gritty aesthetic. I feel like perfectly, where he is a gangster. Yep. He's gonna do these pranks. He's gonna do it his way, but he's still killing people and a menace. And so I just love that. Like this is just like pure Uncle Jack. Just going all out and having fun, in all of his scenes with like Batman and Kim Basinger, and like the start of the Joker and Batman can't live without each other thing that we see
Yes.
time and time again, I feel like is established here too.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like he steals this movie and sets a kind of tone that, so many men are going to want to rise to or be influenced by when they play the Joker.
Yep.
And he has like a kind of coolness to him because,
Oh
like Heath
yeah.
Ledger's Joker is like so clearly a psychopath
Psycho.
and like
Is
wouldn't
yeah,
have been
you're
cool. But it's like Nicholson was a cool dude who's
mhm.
also psychotic, which I think makes people is scarier, frankly.
And I
You
like
know?
his transformation. Like that is one part where I do like them going deeper into the
Mm,
backstory where like you get to see Jack before he becomes the Joker and he was cool even then, like he's sleeping with the boss's wife or whatever and
yes. Yeah, taking whatever he wants
yeah.
already. Mm-hmm.
And so I like that. So it's a transformation, but you just see like, okay, I'm gonna be a psycho, but now I just have this crazy scar smile and like makeup on now, and
Yeah,
it just
I'm
works.
gonna embrace it,
Yeah.
like, I'm not embarrassed by it, I'm gonna use it to my advantage, like, I love his spoof commercials and every time he
Oh
interrupts
my
on the
god,
TV, like,
it's so
so
good.
good.
When he pulls the screen where he's just like, "The mayor, I'm just done here in the sky. Let me just pull the screen over."
Yes. Yes, yeah, he's having so much
Or him
fun.
on the beach, him on the in the beach chair with the drink. It's just yeah, those are some images too that I just love from this movie where it's just him in these
Epic.
ridiculous outfits or ridiculous sets and it just
Just
works.
having fun, like,
Yeah.
playing in the museum, at the parade, just, like, having a good time, and that's not necessarily the way that the other Jokers have a good time, like, their good time is watching people suffer, which is also an important piece to, add to this character, but there's something about how, like, the suffering is an added bonus, he just loves to do whatever the fuck he wants and make you watch it, like, you suffering is a plus, but he was gonna do this regardless, he
When
was
I
gonna have a
wish
good
like
time
modern superhero
regardless.
movies like have this more. It just seems again, it's like that everything has to be hyper real and
Mm,
black and white. And so we need audiences to know that our villain is like he's twisted, he's
yeah.
psycho, like Joaquin Phoenix, being this Joker, like it needs to be this demented Joker. And it's like I kind of miss the fun loving, like you kind of love him even though he's doing all
Yep.
this shit, I wish
That's
we had more of
exactly it,
that.
right? That perfect balance of both campy and dark. He
Yeah.
really nails it. And yeah, I think like the other characters, like I forgot that Billy D. Williams is playing Harvey Dent. And I was like,
It's
oh
so
man.
like
Yeah, this
yeah.
time around, I was like, dude, a little more Dent could have been helpful. And he doesn't come back in the sequel. So it's sort of like you made him an
I
important
think he was
character to
planned
this
to, and I don't
franchise.
remember why it didn't work out. But he
Maybe like some sort of contract dispute or something
yeah, but he was supposed to be in the sequel and have, like, the whole Two-Face, like, setup, that
going.
we get.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, played
And
by
then
Tommy Lee Jones in the sequel,
Uh,
which
I
is
can't even complain. I'm a
you
fan of
know,
that one.
and just, read up on his relationship with Jim Carrey, and it's some of my favorite behind the scenes stuff where he just could not he's, like, hated Jim Carrey on that set.
That's classic Tommy Lee Jones. That's
Yeah.
classic Tommy Lee Jones. Oh my god. But yeah, like I think some of these other like heavy hitters that are here, like Billy D and Jack Palance, like these are bigger guys that I thought would have a more looming part once I realized they were there. And it was interesting that they're there and they're kind of grounding it with their authenticity, but they're not huge parts of the story. I just love how scared Jack Palance is when the Joker shows up again and he's like basically shaking, pouring his liquor, and like he thought he was
Yeah.
gonna get rid of this guy that was coming for him, and it's just amazing how like campily afraid of Nicholson he is, because Nicholson is maniacal. He truly is.
And, like, even in that scene when he kills him, and he's, like, dancing and you get, like, the score, and it's like, yeah, this guy is, like, having a blast, while doing this, and I
Loving it.
the only movie that's really captured that in this way are the Harley Quinn,
Yes,
performance and movies, like, so Suicide Squad and then her own movie, it's like, yes, we can like this character, and she is still, has a screw loose,
yeah, she truly has a screw loose, but we also love watching her have a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes. All right, that brings us to our next segment, the need for speed.
Pain don't hurt.
In this segment, we do what the Oscars don't and honor the amazing stuntmen and women for their death-defying work and pick out the punch that knocked us out the most. Yeah, what were your top three?
I gotta say, pretty much all the Wire stuff really stood out to me. I
Yeah.
liked when he was at the Axis Chemicals situation when the Joker is going to get transformed and he kind of hooks a guy over the ledge on a string and just like hangs a dude. And he's like, "Here, just hang here," like showing that the toys and the like little pieces
Yeah.
of equipment he have works. And
Even
I love
Joker
how
comments on it where he's like, "Where does he get those
that's
toys?"
exactly it. I love that every time he shows up, the Joker's like, "Oh, another toy I
They're very
didn't see
similar.
coming."
They have their own toys, you know, they
That's right.
dress up in
That's right.
costume, you know, they are similar.
They are two sides of the same coin for sure, which I think
Mhm.
is, to your point, why the Joker and Batman exist so intertwined across this franchise.
Oh yeah.
But mostly the Axis chemical sequences did it for me, like blowing it
Again,
up and
iconic.
using,
Iconic.
yeah, using the machine guns to kind of break through the door, and then like all the miniatures and the explosions, everything looks so real. But I think like the best stunt is the Joker becoming the Joker, like falling into the big vat, the like ricochet
Which
that
they bring
creates the
back in Harley
scar.
Quinn again. They you
Yes.
know, it's like I feel like that was another where it's like we're not going to be able to outdo this origin. You know, let's just lean
No,
into
it's
it.
too good. It's
Falling into
too
the
good.
green vat, which like that specific color of green, I just again embedded into my brain. I always remember
Same.
that.
And I love that, the makeup looks amazing, but I love when his like hand pops up out of the water and you're like, there he
Yeah,
is.
it's
He's
like a
born. He's reborn.
Frankenstein monster kind of thing going on there. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that.
So thoughtful and just like such a great combination of like stunt and storytelling. What about you? What stood out to you?
And then when he gets the makeover too, I like when he like smashes the mirror too. It's like again very scary. They don't reveal his face right away until he kills Jack Palance. Is the first time they reveal his new
Yeah,
face,
out
you
of the
know, Joker
shadows he
face.
gets to come. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just edging out my top three, I would say the Batmobile stunts. Again, it's my favorite Batmobile still.
So good.
Only reason it's not in the top three is because I think they did a better job of it in Batman Returns. There's a whole sequence where like a
Oh,
bunch of like clown people are trying to get into the Batmobile in that one, and it's just like taking everybody out, which I just love that scene. And so
yep.
you could tell they're still, you know, messing around with what they can do with it. You know, they got like the armor on it and the guns coming out and stuff like that. Number three, I got Bruce Wayne coming in hot with the "Let's Get Nuts" scene. I just love that so much. It
Yeah,
comes
little
out of
Beetlejuice
nowhere.
sneaks out of him in that moment.
Comes out of nowhere. Every like even Kim Basinger looks scared. You know, it's you know you want to get nuts.
Truly shocked.
So I just love that. Number two, I got Batman fighting the big goon in the tower at the
Yes.
end. You
Yep.
know, it's just again we see this you know trope portrayed a lot. You know, even like Dark Knight Rises, where he's fighting someone you know twice his size. How is he gonna survive out of this?
Yep.
And so I love that he has to use like his wits instead of you know just straight punching because it's not working. You know.
Right.
And then number one, I had the Batman alley fight scene, which is like um, you know, it's like pretty early on, but I think it just does a really nice job. Like I love the way that he shot it, where it's like you just get the camera flash of Vicky Vale's camera, like
Yes.
you know, in between like the punches and things like that, and him using all of his gadgets. I just think like that's a really nice like encapsulation of like Batman, you know. And so yeah, that's my number one.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to our next segment called Death Proof.
If he dies, he dies.
Yes. This is where we'll take a look at the movie's body count and see who bit the dust the hardest. All right. What are your top 3 kills? Give them to me.
I got number three, the Joker falling to his death. Again, so much like the Dark Knight, where he's on the ladder, on the helicopter at the, or like hanging at the end. And so I always feel like I always get these mixed up, where I feel like he dies at the end of Dark Knight and he doesn't, the Joker,
Mm,
because they were going to have him in the third one, you know. And so, um,
sad days.
yeah. Number two, I would say the Batmobile. My favorite part of the Batmobile is when it drops the bomb in the chemical plant. Again, kind of previewing what it can do. And I think also proves that like, you know, because in the Dark Knight ones, it's like, I won't kill anybody. Like that's my rule. You know, and then this one, Batman straight up says, like, I'm gonna kill you to the Joker.
Yep.
And so it's like a very different Batman. And then again, especially in Batman Returns, the body count is like way higher in there. But that's just a glimpse of Batman like not afraid to kill some of these these goons.
These henchman dudes. Yes. Yes.
Um
Exactly.
And then
Um,
number one, this scene just like again, I was like traumatized seeing it as a kid where like he shakes the guy's hand and turns him to a skeleton. It's just I know it's like campy, but the way Jack plays it, it's just like it's so creepy and like him like fixing his tie and everything like that and messing around with this like corpse. There's something
yes.
like really psychotic about it and like dark about it that I even as a kid I could kind of tell, that I should not be watching this or like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not played as real as like when Michael Myers, stabs that one kid and then kind of looks at him, but it's like the
Yeah,
same idea. This idea of like he's holding on to this guy and watching him die in real time and then laughing about it.
yeah, and like playing with them, like playing with this dead body and talking
Yeah,
to him
talking to
after.
it. Ugh,
You
so
just
good.
see him. He looks like he got in a fire. It is ridiculous now, where it's like he just should have just got electrified, but full skeleton like something in Indiana Jones. It's pretty crazy
Yeah, burned his ass all the way up.
to a crisp.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about yours?
Um, I think the number 3 one for me, I really, really love the assassination with the pen, the feather pen, when he just like throws it at the guy's neck and
Yeah.
puts out like the
The
mayor's
pen is truly mightier than the
that's right.
sword.
The other henchman who's like,
I
"Oh,
love
that
his
took all the
punchlines too. He
businesses."
has a punchline after everything, and it's just so
It's
great.
true. Yeah, like that's like another part of, that whimsy that we don't get in the
Yeah.
other ones is like their catchphrases are nowhere near as funny as his are. They are truly comical.
Hmm.
And I just like that as a unique kind of death. You don't see it coming and you're like, "Oh, that's right. This guy kills everybody with some kind of bullshit like this."
Yeah.
And I just love that one. I like to your point about Batman fighting that enormous henchman at the
Yeah.
end. I like how Batman finally kills that guy by like
Hmm.
swinging his legs up and clocking the guy's head on the bell tower bell and then just throwing the guy down the tower. Such a great
Oh, great.
that's Batman just being like, "Bro, I'm sorry. I tried to beat you up and put you out and you just won't go. You've got to die. You have
Yeah.
to die, dude."
Hmm.
But I think my favorite death is when the Joker has tainted all the chemicals from Axis and, the newscaster woman
Yes.
is just
So
like
great.
chilling. And then she starts slowly laughing and it's
Hmm.
like a building death you really don't see coming. And then,
Yeah.
she's got the face. So you become aware that
Yeah.
like,
You see the
oh,
producers behind the camera being like, "What's happening?"
yes, yes. It's a good one. It's
Oh.
a good surprise kind of death.
I love too,
Um,
because it's in the makeup, the newscasters can't wear any makeup. You see like their
yes, they
pimples
all
and
look
their
so
hairs.
ugly. Yes, yes.
It's a very
Yeah.
like subtle joke that I think I forgot about. So like this time it was really funny to watch that.
Exactly, because like even though again there's this campiness here, there are also a couple of real messages underneath the idea that like Gotham is vain and Gotham is greedy,
Yeah.
and like that's what makes it easy for
Yeah,
these
that's how
kinds
he
of
gets
gangsters to
Joker
take
to get
over.
everybody out of in the parade. I'm giving away $20 million,
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. It's like that's why Gotham it has the problems it has, and that's what Batman's always up against as like, a playboy who's very attractive and rich. It's like he represents the
Yeah.
best of those things, and the villains are always using the worst of those things.
True. Very true.
Awesome. All right, that takes us to our next segment, exit wounds.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
This is where we talk about the film's imperfections, decide whether they are fatal hits or just minor flesh wounds. What do you got?
I just feel like all the Joker's henchmen have scarred faces, like he does, and it's like, how does he do that recruiting? Like, how did he find
Maybe it's like
so many
getting
henchmen
jumped
with
into a
scars?
gang or something. You need to get cut.
Yes, maybe. But
Yeah.
that's something that, like, this time in particular, I noticed I was like, oh, damn, everybody that works for him has some sort of facial scar. That
Yeah,
must have been hard
I
to
did want to
coordinate.
talk about this, but like I'll post it on our Instagram too. But one of my favorite is like again to the merchandising thing. They made an action figure to his right hand man, Bob the Goon,
Let's go.
and and it's so funny. I'll like I said, I'll
Yeah, put
post
that
it.
on the
But
Instagram.
I think just beyond that, I think that's just a smart Tim Burton thing, maybe, where it's like they all look unique. Like even the guy just holding the boombox with that like handle must like that.
Yes,
It's
yes.
just like they all like stand out in their own way. So I do love that, even though it is kind of weird.
Yes, yes. And I also love all their matching jackets. Like the swag
Yeah, they
in
have
the
merch.
nine is
They have
so
Joker
good. Yeah,
merch.
I want that merch. The merch is good.
I know.
And then the only other thing is like Alfred totally blows up Batman's spot by just like straight bringing Vicky into the den and like no one ever addresses it. Like he's not like Alfred,
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to tell her or I didn't think it was a good idea. Like Alfred just forces it, which is weird
Yeah.
because you know, in all the other ones, I don't think he really ever gets to that level of transparency, and Vicky doesn't even show up again.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. It is kind of left out in the open. Like he doesn't seem, again, maybe because underplaying, he doesn't seem like that shocked by it. So like maybe he knew it was going to happen, but again, this is just us like
It's
speculating about what.
Yeah, having to draw
Uh,
the connections, which is kind of goofy to me.
um,
Yeah, what
yeah.
about you?
We kind of talked about it, but the lack of chemistry is just like really,
Not great.
so it's. I just don't see what she's attracted to with him in the first place, and it's like they're sitting at the dinner table, just like how's your soup, shouting across the table. And it's like one of the most awkward date
Yeah, they
scenes. It's
look like
just
teenagers or something.
like they've never been on a date, and so it's like I understand that for Bruce, he's this traumatized guy or whatever, but like, what's her problem? Why is she not being like, why don't we sit together? Like, I guess they do get to that point, but just needed more from one of them. They both
Yeah.
be underplaying it. And then the second one, this was just like a change they made from the comic books that I just don't get the logic of. Maybe this was like a producer's note or something, but like, why did Joker have to be related to the Bruce's deaths of his parents? I just it's put in there and it almost feels like a reshoot. You know what I mean? Where it's just like he thinks about what the Joker said and he's like, oh, this guy. I guess maybe it's like if he's gonna kill the Joker, we need some like
Yeah, we need good motivation or like something that the audience will think is like
when
reasonable
this guy is
motivation.
killing people in the city, he's like
Yeah,
bringing terrorism to the city. It's
it
like
should
that's
be enough.
enough,
Yeah.
so I just it changes the character dynamic where like it to me at least it's like Batman's a vengeful character instead of one that brings justice to it. So I don't mind the like Batman I'm not killing anybody thing because it's a very tricky line where it's like you're just this rich asshole who's dressing up as a bat and killing people. It just not great, not
Yeah.
great. So,
Yeah,
but they do fix that. I feel like in the newer ones, which is nice.
for sure. For sure.
This takes us to a special segment for today called "Who's Your Batman?"
Hey, who's Batman to you? Like when you think of Batman, who's Batman?
Are you kidding me?
Christian Bale?
Christian Bale.
Michael Keaton is Batman to me.
All right, yeah. Who are your Batmans? In this segment, we'll pick between all the stunts that have played him across the 5 decades, which is like
Yeah,
a wild thing to think of because like a lot of dudes have played him.
all
But
the
yeah,
hunks.
who
Yeah.
when you think of Batman, who do you think of?
So I do remember like my first when I was a kid. Obviously it was like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, which are like not the great ones, admittedly. So like those were my childhood Batman, but
Okay,
having seen all of the films and everything, I would have to say Keaton and Bale. And as far as the live action ones,
mm,
Ben Affleck, it's unfortunate he didn't get to do more with that character. We'll
right,
see what Robert Pattinson brings to it. Um, obviously you go with the animated ones. I think what's Kevin Conroy is just like iconic voice of Batman.
right,
And I do love like the Lego Batman ones too. I think
yeah,
are really funny. So a lot of great choices, but I would just have to say like Keaton, just for capturing like this time and aesthetic right.
right,
But Bale, I think Bale's like Bruce Wayne is just like a lot more. He is playing that playboy character a lot better and more believable. Where it's like this one's like pretty obvious. I mean, Alfred, like when he interrupts and he's just like, "They left the party very early, Bruce," like winking to him. I'm like, guys, like, can you be a little more subtle? Like you're in
yes.
public. So yeah. What about you though?
I think for me, I agree. You know, the Kilmer and Clooney ones were kind of the ones of my childhood per se. But for me, it's got to be Keaton and Kilmer because I love the one with the Riddler and with Two Face, and I love Batman Forever. Like I think Forever, sorry, not Forever. Batman Returns. I
Batman
think that's
Returns
my
is great.
favorite of all of
Yeah.
them. I just love to rewatch it. DeVito's so good in it. Fucking Michelle Pfeiffer, like
That
it's
actually
just
just
too
celebrated
good.
anniversary too recently.
Ah, it's so
And
good.
yeah, it's definitely. I remember one time I ranked on another YouTube channel. We ranked top 5 DC films, and I fought for Batman Returns to get in that top 5. I'm like, I am straight up leaving the show if we do not have Batman Returns somewhere in this top 5.
So good.
Uh,
And I don't know, there's just something about the Kilmer one that I like a lot. I love Nicole Kidman in that. And like I said, like the Riddler is the closest to a kind of Joker that, resembles Nicholson's Joker. And I love, love, love that one. So
yeah.
even though I agree, I think Bale like really gave a kind of dynamic to Bruce Wayne that helped capture, like the depth of
I
who
think
that
by
guy
far the
really
best
is.
Bruce Wayne. I don't think it's even up for debate.
It's true.
so much
Yeah.
more realized and psychologically rich, compared to
Yes.
this one
Yeah,
where
the
he
depth
just
is really there.
yeah.
And we'll see about Pattinson because I agree. Like I like that Affleck got a try. I just wish he had a little bit more to work with. And I love the way they've cast Bruce Wayne across the years. To both be the character of Bruce, but also to try to figure out how that man embodies being Batman. I think that's always a really interesting part of this franchise too.
It's a rich character, and yeah, anyone who puts on the cowl, I at least respect it because it's very hard. It's very hard to. There's so much history with this character that people have.
That's right. There's a lot to live up to. All right, cool. That brings us to our last segment. Game over, man.
What a picture.
Good picture, yeah.
That is so much fun. I love that stuff, the killing.
A lot of killing.
This is where we rate the film out of 5 bat signals. I'll go first, and I'll say I'll give this the 3.5. I look fondly on it because it is the first really to bring in this new era of Batman. But again, this wasn't like what I was watching when I was a kid necessarily. It was definitely like the other 3, like Batman Returns. Those were like more around the time. And then the ones I go back to would probably be like The Dark Knight, and Pattinson's one I've seen like a few times now, and so it's a good stepping stone. Just like the first Superman movie, opened the door for superhero films, which is like so normalized now. But I do think they would like go on to perfect the formula a little more. So that's why 3.5.
Yes.
What about you?
Perfect. That's exactly my rating and reasoning. I also give this film 3.5 stars because it is such a great launcher. I'm so glad that it sets the tone for like what the rest of the film should try to kind of take the lead from, but they really do take the lead and make, such better, more realized, more authentic stories and stunts and films, across the next 5 decades, which is it's just wild. But I do feel like, the pinnacle is yet to come. And this one, while it's a great launcher, it does not compare to some of those later films, like you mentioned.
Yeah. It's tough to beat, I mean, I completely understand, like probably someone, who grew up in the Dark Knight trilogy era could look back on this and be like, what, this is campy, like weird. And it's like, yeah, that's what we were at with Batman back then. But you have to love some like Jack's performance, undeniable. I mean, come on.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that about wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
All right, get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and on Twitch at The Buffs. And you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
So you never miss a rep. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
Next week, we're going to be covering the all-new Axel F., the newest installment of the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. Thanks again for listening. We're looking forward to catching you on another edition of Movie Buffs. Until then...
Never rub another man's rhubarb.